Welcome back. Time for our GMC Sierra Tweet of the Night. Comes from Michael Birch, Steelers PR team, who says only players to have seasons with 17 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, 30 quarterback hits, 4 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries. TJ Watt's there in the middle. He's doing that this season. Also, well, he did it in 2021 as well. His big brother, JJ, did it as well in 2014, and Jarrett Allen in 2011. Now, bear in mind, the last 2 times it happened, it was a Watt brother, and they won the Defensive Player of the Year award. The only one who did not win it was Jarrett Allen in 2011. He finished second in the voting. But if you have a season like that, it's kind of hard to argue against that kind of resume for Defensive Player of the Year. Chris Adamski, where do you stand on the discussion around Defensive Player of the Year? Is TJ Watt the front runner in your mind?
I mean, in my mind, I think he should be more of a front runner than he is. It seems like there's no real momentum for him if you go by sort of media straw polls and what people are saying on social media and even in columns and things like that. And if you look at the betting markets and things like that, it seems like he's a tier below Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett. And I don't know, I always said if he gets to 20 sacks, which he has a game left to get to 3 sacks, certainly if he gets to 22 and ties his record again, he should be it. But if he gets to 20, he has a fighting chance. But it seems like for whatever reason, whether there's Watt fatigue or what, or whether they want to reward Myles Garrett, who hasn't won one, or Micah Parsons, and I don't know. But I think he needs to have a big last couple games here to have a shot.
You bring up an interesting concept about rewarding certain people or maybe leaving certain people off. We got a tweet here that asks the question, why isn't Hines Ward a finalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame yet? Is it because he doesn't have the stats, or is it something else? My answer is simply timing. There's a couple other receivers that are ahead of him right now on the ballot. They've been waiting a little bit longer than him. They're going to put those guys in first. They tend to do this. They're going to go chronologically with guys that have come up first for eligibility. They don't like putting on more than one at a time, so he's waiting behind a couple guys. I'm going to say he's behind Torrey Holt is one of them, and there's someone else he's stuck behind too.
Reggie Wayne, I believe.
I think it is Reggie Wayne. There's a couple of receivers ahead of him, and they're going to get those guys through first before we get to him. It really has nothing to do with his production or his numbers because he has them. It's just because they've created this logjam as far as players they let in. But Chris, do you have any other kind of interpretation for that?
Yeah, I think Hines will get in at some point for sure. I don't know exactly when. I think he has such a unique skill set or a unique resume with the blocking, with the physical nature he was, Super Bowl MVP. It sort of sets him apart from those guys that makes him different. You could make a case against Hines and say maybe. I mean, you really could. You could sit here and say, hey, was he the most feared receiver on his team at any point? Antonio Holmes is probably more feared when he was there, Plaxico Burress when he was there with Hines. So you can make the case against it, but I think he has so much going for him in a really unique way that sets him apart from all those other guys we mentioned that will eventually get him in. But he's going to have to wait. He's already waited a long time, and it might even be the Veterans Committee. I don't know. We get that far down the road, but yeah, he hasn't been able to break past this semifinalist, let alone get to the finalist part.
Yeah, depending on what era you play in, there are always certain boxes that you have to tick off. He ticks off the yardage box. He ticks off the catches box. He's played in a couple Super Bowls. He has a Super Bowl MVP. He ticks those off. But then there's that other box on the other side that talks about the way you impact the game. He ticks that off as well as a receiver. 412-575-2600 on the Borders and Borders hotline. Chuck in Uniontown. You're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Thanks. Good evening and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Chuck. Yeah. Appreciate you.
What I'd like to know is, who are the key teams or teams the Steelers need to lose to get into a playoff spot? And could the city of Pittsburgh ever host a collegiate bowl game? Thanks. Bye-bye.
Appreciate the call, Chuck. To answer your first question, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong on this, there are 3 teams in the AFC South. They need at least 2 of them to lose once. And at least one of them is guaranteed to lose because 2 of them play each other in Houston and Indianapolis. So they need at least one of those teams to lose once, which one is guaranteed to, and even if they tie, it still counts. The other one, I believe, if Buffalo loses one of the next couple games, I think Cleveland needed to lose their last couple here, but they ended up winning last night, so they are now in. So Cleveland is no longer a factor. But if they can get Jacksonville, Houston, Indianapolis to lose at least once, or Buffalo to lose one time, out of those 4 teams, if 2 of those 4 teams lose one game and the Steelers win both of their games, I believe they are in.
The way I look at it is if the Steelers win their last 2, the odds are very good they'll be in. If they
Yes.
lose even one of the two, the odds are almost impossible for them to get in. So if you're a Steeler fan, root for your team to win these last two games. I think everything will take care of itself. Yeah, it's right. You're right. There's not 100% certainty if they finish 10-7, they get in. But just looking at it and the way things play out, usually when you get this time of year, if that happens, if you win your games and you're in this spot, you'll get in. And 10-7, you would think most years will get you in a 17 playoff field in the AFC.
If I'm looking at the most realistic, I think, way to do it right now that makes sense, I think, at least I think it's possible. We already know between Houston and Indianapolis, one's going to beat the other, or they're at the very least going to tie. So you don't have to worry about that. The next thing I think that helps them, Baltimore beating Miami coming up here this week.
That'd be big.
That'd be big because, A, Baltimore clinches home field, and then they probably sit guys for that last game against the Steelers. Then also Miami is forced to have to try to beat Buffalo in Week 18. And if Miami beats Buffalo Week 18, they win the AFC East, and Buffalo is now out. That feels like the easiest path for me as far as the Steelers needing help.
How many times in our lives, Josh, we know each other for a while, been alive for longer than we think probably, have the Steelers been looking up at the Cleveland Browns in this thing? The Cleveland Browns have 11 wins, Josh, with a week to go in the season. It's the first time since 1989 that the Steelers will finish behind the Browns in the standing. That's almost unfathomable. The same year, by the way, that the Pirates finished ahead of the St. Louis Cardinals for the first time since 1999. Both those streaks are both incredible, and they both ended this year. So, again, the Steelers almost certainly won't finish in last place now after beating Cincinnati last week. So that's another streak that they can kind of hang their hats on. I know people get sick of the streaks that don't involve championships.
We got to take another break. We'll wrap up when we come back. Stick around.